My name is Jason Running, and today we're going to go over how video games change film and TV. So, brief overview. Between 1985 and 2020, video games went from simply pixelated fun to full blown cinematic experiences, and that shift changed movies and TV too. Games became more story driven, more realistic, and started influencing how film and TV are made and written, all at the same time. Games started being adapted into shows and movies, with mixed results at first, but big improvements later on. This project explores how the rise of video games reshaped the film and television industries in terms of storytelling, visual design, and production technology. Why I chose this topic. I've always been into both games and movies, so this felt like the perfect mix of interests. In class, we talked about things like digital effects and big shifts in media, but we didn't really cover how games played a role in that. Video games have a huge impact on how stories are told and how films and shows are created. It's something that I think deserves more attention, especially now that games are being taken more seriously as art and narrative media. What this project covers. This project looks at four big things. First, how video games became more cinematic, especially in the 90s and 2000s. Then, how their storytelling and visual style started influencing movies and TV shows. I'll also talk about game to movie adaptations and how those improved over time. Finally, I'll show how game technology like Unreal Engine is now used in filmmaking to create worlds and scenes in new ways. Games became more cinematic. In the 80s and 90s, games like Metal Gear, Final Fantasy, and Chrono Trigger started using cutscenes and complex storylines. By the 2000s, games like Uncharted, Mass Effect, and The Last of Us were basically interactive movies with full voice acting, character arcs, and dramatic scripts. These games often had cinematographers and screenwriters on the dev team. They used motion capture and 3D animation to make characters feel realistic and emotional. Playing a game became a full story experience, not just a challenge or a competition. Games influenced film and TV. As games became more cinematic, movies and TV started borrowing their ideas too. Interactive storytelling, like in Bandersnatch and Westworld, uses branching narratives, something games have done for years, visually gritty realism, and stylized fantasy worlds. From games influenced shows like Stranger Things and movies like Ready Player One. Directors like Neil Blomkamp, who made District 9, said he was inspired by Halo, even made short films using game engines before directing a feature film based on Gran Turismo. Game to film adaptations got better. Early game adaptations like Super Mario Bros. 1993 and Street Fighter 1994 were flops because they didn't respect the original material. That changed with newer films like Detective Pikachu from 2019 and Sonic the Hedgehog from 2020, which stayed closer to the source and actually understood what fans wanted. The biggest success was The Last of Us on HBO in 2023, which followed the game almost exactly and became one of the highest rated game adaptations ever. Streaming platforms made it possible to tell longer, more emotional stories that match the depth of games. Game tech used in filmmaking. Game engines like Unreal Engine are now used to make actual movies and TV shows. The Mandalorian uses a new system called the Volume, which is a huge LED wall that displays 3D environments in real time. It's powered by Unreal Engine and lets actors act in front of realistic backdrops instead of green screens. This saves money and helps directors make changes on the fly, just like in a game engine. It's now being used for other shows and movies too, proving that game tech is becoming essential to film production. Research I used. To put this together, I watched behind the scenes features from The Mandalorian and The Last of Us, which explained how game tech and storytelling work in those productions. I also watched video essays from YouTube channels like NoClip and Game Maker's Toolkit, which break down how cinematic games are made. Articles from Polygon and Wired helped me understand how Unreal Engine is being used in the film industry. I looked at interviews with game developers and filmmakers who've worked on adaptations. Most of my sources were from creators or industry insiders, not just critics or fans. Why this matters. Video games are now leading the way in how stories get told. They've influenced not only how films and shows look and feel, but how they're written and even how they're produced. As more directors grow up, playing games that influence will only get stronger. Plus, with tools like Unreal Engine, smaller creators can now make high quality stuff without huge Hollywood budgets. Understanding the crossover between games and films helps us see where the future of media is going. Thanks for listening to my presentation. Hopefully, I taught you something new about how video games change the way film is being produced, how behind the scenes everything, and how video game technology is basically just it making it easier for us to make films.